Hey everybody, Jimmy here, and I'm joined by Instructor Mike Griffin, who of course is going to talk to us today about seeing stuff in the dark. And specifically, this time, our segment is going to be about two different types of night vision. And maybe if you're new to the whole world of NODS, you may not even realize that there actually are two different types. There's digital and analog. I think there's sometimes different names referred to or given to the analog side of things. Haven't you said I squared once before?
Yeah, so the way if you talk about like things that fall under commonly called night vision, there's I squared, which is image intensification, and then under that branch would be digital and analog, and then the other side would be thermal, and people commonly call that night vision, even though it can be used, any time of the day, day or night. So it's image intensification would be the kind of upper level, description for the items back here, and you've got the analog, the PVS-14 that we have here on display, and then these other digital samples.
Understood. Okay. So yeah, the PVS-14 that we have over here is sort of like what most people probably imagine when they think about night vision. It could be green phos, it could be white phos, it could, basically you use it to see at night. We've all seen the movie Step Brothers, probably, right? I mean, it's awesome. Can you imagine if we had this when we were 12 or whatever? So yeah, that's how it's going to look. And nowadays we're starting to get this digital night vision, which Mike is going to go into a lot more, but it's essentially like a camera that's super designed around helping you see at night. It has some really unique features to it, and I think today we're going to talk about, what are they and the pros and cons maybe for you out there looking to purchase night vision, the pros and cons of going with one over the other. Right?
Yeah. So just to dive right in, analog night vision has been around for a long time. It's seen a lot of advancements, but it's basically old technology, kind of antiquated technology. When you talk about like image intensification tubes, they kind of fall into an industry that's been around for decades, probably you could even say over 100 years at this point. And they follow those basic concepts, but we've taken them to a really, really high level. A lot of other applications for that style of tube has been transitioned over. So if you think about like old school recorder, like video recorders, use similar technology to that. Old school televisions use similar technology to that. And now we have like digital replacements for those that function well beyond anything that you could have had in old tube type technology. Okay. The downside is we've not had the advancements in the image intensification side that we have on the analog side of image intensification when we talk about digital. So we've got two Psionics options here. I think they're probably the most popular choices in digital.
Psionics being the brand name of the digital night vision options we have here.
They're the most popular options out right now for digital night vision, and they've put a lot of time and effort into investing into the concept of digital night vision that is portable, versus there's a lot of digital night vision out there that exists in static configurations. So you think of like security cameras, your doorbell cameras, and home security cameras, industrial or commercial style security cameras that can see both during the day or at night. That's just very similar technology to this, but it has the benefit of larger footprint, easier to sort of cram technology into a container, and you mount it somewhere instead of trying to have it in a size that you can carry around with you relatively conveniently. You don't have the concerns of power consumption, that sort of thing. So
well, and usually those ones that you see too, they're mounted stationary. And oftentimes when you look at playback footage, like on a security camera or something like that at night, it's oftentimes not the greatest frame rate. It's a little bit,
correct.
It just kind of, it looks like an old video in terms of it's a little grainy and all that stuff. So they're trying to cram all that stuff into these tiny footprints. By the way, you might have to move your mic a little closer.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go.
Anyway, but they're trying to fit all that into these tiny little footprints. And actually, one of the really cool things is, too, and I'll throw this out there as a full disclosure in terms of time of recording here. I know we're going to release this probably, later on significantly, but we recorded this episode once before, and at that time, all we had was the Psionics Aurora over here, which is kind of more looks like a classic digital camcorder in some ways, a little micro one, if you will. But then over here in the middle, we have their Opsin, which for us, right now at recording, it's relatively new for them. And I actually went out and got this thing because it was pretty exciting. They were saying a lot about how much of an improvement it was and how close they felt that they were getting to the analog night vision capabilities and all that stuff. So anyways, we have these two options. That's kind of what we're referring to in the digital side of things.
Yeah, and the Opsin is a really exciting addition to their lineup in the sense that I think a lot of people out in the kind of night vision realm were interested in the Aurora, and they were, making 3D printed mounts and things like that to either have them set up as a monocular or taking 2 units, pairing them together as a binocular type device. And Psionics took that information, obvious, market feedback, and created something that's pretty, it pretty well resembles a PVS 14. So just in, aesthetics, it looks very similar to a PVS 14. It comes with a mount that you can slide into standard dovetails like a Wilcox mount, that sort of thing.
To put it right on a helmet.
Yep. So it's really easy to helmet mount. In fact, I would almost say that like this one is really targeted towards being used helmet mounted. You could use it handheld, but it has a remote battery pack. It may be a touch cumbersome to use it as a handheld device versus the Aurora line of devices, because I think they have a couple of tiers for the Aurora product line. And so the Opsin is really targeted at that head-mounted, walking around, more dynamic stuff than the Aurora, which was, to me, intended as like an action camera or, gathering and collecting information more so than your ability to interact with your environment and run around and do stuff with it.
Yeah.
So,
and obviously, being the podcast that you're listening to, you're being Vortex Edge. We are interested in the mounting to a helmet and doing more active stuff with it, whether that be, running around doing stuff out in your backyard or, of course, shooting at night or in the dark or something like that with lasers and things like that on our carbines. So that's kind of the way or the lens in which we're looking at this whole thing with. But I feel like if anybody clicked on this episode, maybe it was just out of curiosity, but I think there are a lot of people out there who are wondering, okay, I'm really curious. I'm wanting to get into night vision, and there's this digital thing. And that's kind of the one thing looming out there. Because like you said, stuff like this PVS 14, the analog side of thing, has been around for a very, very long time. It's pretty well proven in terms of what you're going to get. Like, if I go analog, I'm not really going to be disappointed because I've seen these images before. I kind of know that it works. And digital is the relative newcomer, and so I think a lot of people are like, well, what am I sacrificing? Am I getting just as good? Are there benefits actually? So like, what are the pros and cons? I feel like this is a good place to start with the digital.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we think about analog. So if you're old enough to have like older cell phones or used any sort of communications tools that fell under the analog banner, then when you hear digital, like automatically you think like, oh, that's an upgrade. Like that's better, right? It's more advanced. Unfortunately, I don't think we're quite there yet for commercial products. So we're not talking about things that are in use by the military, things that are mounted to vehicles, those sorts of things that are not accessible to you and I or the average, consumer. And so we have to talk about the stuff that's available out there on the market. And right now, I wouldn't necessarily say that digital night vision is up to the level of even, I guess you could call it entry level or budget minded analog night vision. So The way digital night vision works is, we kind of touched on it earlier. You've got a camera with this has a lens assembly that allows us to focus it at different distances. So it's not autofocus. It focuses very similar to a PVS 14. But behind that lens, we have a camera sensor. It gathers information, and you can manipulate components of that or variables to that camera sensor. So we can adjust frame rate. We can adjust ISO, or the sensitivity of the sensor, and a number of other things. That information comes in the sensor, then it goes to a chipset, basically a little computer in there. That computer, interprets that information and tries to optimize it to be presented out to basically a TV screen inside of the device. And so over here we've got the objective lens. We've got all the sensor and the computer in there, and then there's basically a screen back here on just in front of the ocular lens, so you can touch up that, and you're just looking at a screen, just like you would be looking at a TV. And so there are some benefits to that concept, because we can integrate a lot of information in there. This one has the ability to record information. We have digital zoom. We have the ability to take pictures, either still photos, or, like I said, record video. It has a microphone, so it can record audio.
It does. That's cool.
It also has, I haven't played too much with it, but at least in one of the menus, there's some GPS options in there.
It's got a compass.
It does have a compass. Yep. So there's a lot of stuff that you can plug into that screen that is the user interface side of things, and I think that's a huge capability that can be advanced in a great way. So maybe put other information in there that's usable that the analog side doesn't have. So those are kind of the pros, right? It's also less expensive. Although I will say, I want to say the price tag right now is around $2,500.
Yeah, it is. So it's definitely not cheap.
It's not. And this, I want to say, last time I checked, so I apologize, don't quote me on prices, was closer to the $1,000 mark.
The Aurora Pro here, yeah. And this is the
Uh,
Pro model. Even some of their more entry-level models you can get, or I've seen, again, at the time of recording, all the way down, it's close to like 500. So, yeah, in there.
Yeah, and that's not, accounting for like promos and rebates and that sort of thing. But so you got roughly $1,000, roughly $2,500. And then the PVS 14 that we have sitting here is a personal unit of mine that's probably close to, I bought it in 2006, so it's 16, 17 years old. And unfortunately, if I had to pick one of those devices today to go and shoot drills or take out and walk around in the dark, I would still pick that old analog PVS 14.
Right.
Because the digital technology just isn't there yet.
Yeah.
The biggest sort of limiting factors are, we've got a camera system, and it's gathering information through that sensor, and you have to adjust what the frame rate and the things that we touched on before. And so then we put that information into the computer, and it spits it out onto a screen, and there's a bunch of latency potential there. So it takes time for the information to be gathered by the sensor and then transmitted out to the user. And that time means that when you're reacting with the environment, you're a split second behind what the environment is doing, whereas the PVS 14 or analog night vision as a whole is almost instantaneous. I mean, it's basically at the speed of light, so it's not going to be very different. The latency of information gathering that you see isn't going to be different from the ability for me to just look around in the environment with my naked eye, my unaided eye. And I think with time we can see advances on the digital night vision side. We're just not quite there yet. And also, there's a couple of other things that I noticed using it. The sensor and the package as a whole has some latency in responding to changing light. So one thing that I ran into, and there may be some settings that I tried optimizing the settings as much as I could when I was using a laser. If I turn the laser on, then the image would take a split second to change and adapt to that dramatic increase in light in the environment. And so when you're thinking about doing like presentation drills with a carbine, and I don't want to have my laser or IR illuminator on all the time, so I bring the gun up and I turn the laser on in the process of presenting the gun up on target. Now the camera has to go through and make an adjustment to that change in the environment, and so it's a little sluggish. That latency is noticeable when you have quick changes to light in the environment. And then there is some latency when you're like panning across an area or you're running or something like that. Anything that's causing a lot of information to be processed through the device. If you're just sitting there observing an area, waiting for maybe an animal to come across or a person, if you're doing surveillance or that sort of thing, I think it's better suited for the less dynamic roles.
Right.
But it does have some pros. Like if I wanted to go out and record, shooting a drill or somebody else shooting a drill where I could stand still and watch them perform the drill, I think that's a good, use for the record features that are in there. There's some other, scenarios that I could think of that I think the, extra utility that's built into the system really shine. But for strictly like interacting with your environment in a very dynamic manner, shooting, I think analog still, has the upper hand on those devices. But
it definitely seems that way. And I mean, you brought up the latency thing, and it's all relative speaking, right? I mean, we're talking about split seconds here, but these are things that you notice the more fast you go. We're using the term dynamic, but I mean, we're talking about moving your head quickly, bringing a gun up quickly, trying to react to something or do something relatively quickly speaking. That's where you start to notice yourself maybe outrunning it a little bit. It definitely catches up. I know that we were playing around with it here just with a few of the other guys. And it's, Mike, you have tons of time behind night vision of all different varieties, and you noticed it more than some of us who have less experience behind night vision devices who are sort of like, this is super cool, and one of the really wild things about it is you see through the PVS 14 or you have a set of DTMVS, whatever it is, dual tubes, binocular style, the analog style night vision you see in a green scale or a gray scale, and when you look through a digital night vision device, you're seeing full color, which is
correct.
Really bizarre. And you can see the color of someone's shirt. You can see the color of different lights in the room. It's really almost just like, I guess, you're turning on some sort of light source in the room in a lot of ways when you actually look through it. So that's pretty wild. And then, to your point, Mike, if you're just doing something that is less dynamic, maybe you're just walking around at night, or the surveillance thing where you can record and capture photos and stuff like that. That is pretty unique. And of course, a unit like this, it's actually a performance upgrade over the Aurora model that we have. So it performs better in low light, but it also mounts easier to a helmet, and it sets up better that way. But
I will say I definitely noticed the image quality improvement of the Opsin over the Aurora. So kudos to the manufacturer Psionics for their progress, and I hope that they continue to invest in. I mean, I think one day we will be using digital night vision very similar to the ways that we use analog night vision. Yeah. I think that's just a reality. But we're not quite there. But it's good to see the progression and their dedication to the concept. They're obviously heavily invested into it, and I think they are looking at the application in a lot of different areas. And I'm glad they brought something out that satisfies at least some of the requests by the market. That is, to me, growing at an impressive rate. The commercial user market for head-mounted night vision. And so they came out with the Opsin that address a lot of those requests, and I think there's opportunities for refinement there. So kudos to them for the progress that they made from the Aurora. The image quality is definitely improved.
It's nice to see it jump. Sometimes you see people come out with something new, and you're like, well, you just tweak the look. but
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing. This is a notable jump. Mike, one of the other things we talked about as well is that this is a camera, right?
It is.
So if you want to go outside of the U.S., for example, you can do that with this device. These regular analog night vision devices, they are ITAR regulated.
Correct.
And so therefore, there's difficulties with traveling across borders and things of that nature. In fact, actually, we don't really have, on the Vortex Edge page, we don't really have any footage through night vision that we've recorded, because you have to be careful when you put that information out there on the internet, or at least we do, because it is ITAR regulated, and so therefore somebody who isn't, a U.S. citizen or something like that could then view that, and it's a gray area, right, with that. And so, we could either you could go across the border and take something like this along with you, and then at least you have something that's really pretty good. Or one of the things that I would love to do, and hopefully we'll get into more, is if you are trying to, instruct somebody like we tend to do, we could maybe show video or images or something like that under night vision, showing some various things to people to help people learn, where we're using the recording function or the photo function. And, like we've used this, at least it's there's some latency, but we're kind of holding a pistol out with a red dot on night vision mode, and you could actually transition between targets pretty well and just kind of show what that looks like. You could even do it. The other thing is you could do it in the daytime too. This doesn't have to be a night vision only device. You can walk from a completely dark room, boom, right into a bright room. So that's kind of where I know, like you said, I mean, I'm still on the same boat myself, where the analog ones absolutely have a place, but I think the excitement level for me is super high with seeing, like where digital can go because of how much potential it has.
Correct. And that's something I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, is you can use it and basically any lighting level, right? So similar to cameras, if I were to shine a laser in the end of that, the objective side of that, I could damage the sensor. I have seen like high-end DSLRs and cameras like that be damaged by really bright lasers. And so there is some limit to the light exposure that you can apply to that before you run the risk of causing damage. But I could turn this on in this very bright room, and it's not going to cause any damage to it. And I could immediately walk into a dark room, and as long as there's enough light for the chipset and sensor to process, I would be able to see. And then I could come right back out into a lighted room, and at the same time I could record all of that.
Yeah.
So I will say that I think we will use this a good bit doing first-person view demo stuff where we can record, because it is one of the easier ways, I think, that we've found to get a good recording of what the user sees through like a pistol mounted red dot, like you said. And so I think that is a cool resource. Touching on kind of the spectrum of light that it'll work on, one of the downsides, and I think one of the big questions that people have about digital night vision is, well, does it work in as dark of an environment as analog? And unfortunately, it doesn't.
Right.
And so if you think about, like, if we were to cut a chunk of space out of the light spectrum of where it could look at from like daytime, not the electromagnetic spectrum, but like daytime all the way to complete darkness. This has more coverage into the lighted environment, but it doesn't have as much low-level performance, unfortunately. Yeah. There's a point where it just falls off and you can't really make out anything. Whereas the analog night vision will go a little bit further. So if your application is in an environment where you can put out ambient light, IR light from a flashlight, IR illuminator on a laser and that sort of thing, and you're not really concerned about, that being indicative of your location to an opponent, then, digital night vision in its current state may be a good resource for you. Mm-hmm. If you're concerned about really, really dark use, I think digital or analog night vision is still the way to go. But it does have a lot of cool features. I particularly, I think a lot of people think, oh, it's got a compass, big whoop. The compass feature is actually a really nice feature, particularly if you're kind of out in big environments as opposed to just on a square range. That
big
sort of
environments and in the dark. It's kind of nice to know cardinal directions. The power usage you brought up earlier. Now, this PVS 14, do you have the one that does this run on a AA?
That one does run on a AA, yeah.
This unit in and of itself is contained. Like, this is ready to go. Throw it on a helmet and go. And that will last you, a fresh AA will last you what?
So I don't remember the spec on a PVS 14. That one I could easily get through an entire night's worth, if not multiple nights worth of usage on that, one AA. Yeah. So if I were to go to a 2-day class, I could, or 2-night class, I could get through that with the single fresh AA in that PVS 14. Granted, I would probably bring a spare, right, just to be safe. But I should be able to get through that 16-ish hour, maybe 18 hours of nighttime utilization off of that single AA battery. And it's been a while since I ran a 14 for a class. But even like my PVS 31s, I get hours, lots and lots of time out of a single battery for that device without going to the battery pack. Yeah. So
even the Bino ones, the DTMVS, I think one little CR 123 is like 8 hours or something like that. Yeah. So that's pretty good, and that helps keep you nice and lightweight. It leaves room for maybe other stuff on your helmet too, because in comparison, you see with the Opsin here, it comes with this external power source, and this is what you have to use. So the Opsin in and of itself, when you hold it up next to the PVS 14, you're like, wow, it's pretty much the same size, but it is a requirement to run it with this kind of little canteen-looking thing. That's actually what my wife thought I got. She thought I got a canteen. Flask. I told her it was, a little flask. And I was like, no, it's, night vision batteries, which totally makes sense to your wife when you're trying to explain what you've just purchased. But that's something you have to do. So if you were running, say, a counterweight, I guess this could replace that. But we've talked about in the Helmet Setup Night Vision podcast, which you should check out if you haven't yet. Maybe you want to have a pouch on the back of your helmet that instead of just holding lead weights, it holds extra batteries or it holds something, a chem light or whatever. I don't know what it is. But that's going to be some space and weight and stuff on your helmet that now you have to have in order to make this thing work. And I think that flask-size battery gets you about 8 hours.
If I remember correctly, it is roughly 8 hours. I remember thinking that if I was going to go to a class and I was going to try and run digital night vision for the class, that I would want to have at least one spare battery, if not two. And that way I can have, one that I'm running plus a backup to get through that one night of class. And then I could charge up, one. Yeah. And then have a backup ready to go for the next night. It unfortunately that is a byproduct of the digital processor. So you have the processing, the computer in there, as well as the screen that needs to be, like, all of it needs to be powered, but you're projecting an image onto a little screen there, and that eats up energy at a much higher rate than the analog image intensification tube. And so when you think about weight on your helmet, the longevity of that battery pack, like how long is it going to last for a single charge, those are things that are concerns, and if you're burning through that much energy, one thing I do hear touched on occasionally is thermal signature. So if you think about like burning through that amount of energy is probably going to create a bigger thermal signature than this over here. Is that really a big concern? That. I don't know. I mean, it's attached to your head, and you're a pretty big thermal
your face
signature.
Is a pretty,
So I hear it touched on some videos and commentary about the digital night vision products, but it's just something to be mindful of, that this is 8 hours of battery life. This brick that you have to stick on your helmet. The equivalent battery pack for like my PVS 31 equivalent size, roughly, will power it for many, many nights. It's got 4 AA's in there, so it powers it for a very long time, as well as having a built-in IR beacon to it. So
luckily they made a nice lightweight battery, so the weight
Yeah.
wasn't even that much of a concern for me. I just know that it was like, it's more of a space and size thing. If you don't want a big thing hanging off your helmet, you're going to have to, and then it's taking up space where other things could have gone, I know. But the long-term thing that I'll be interested to see, I mean, as far as when you hold this thing and you look at build quality, I mean, there's nothing suspect about it right off the bat, right? You look at it and you're like, this thing is well made.
Yeah.
Your PVS 14 here, you said you've had for well over a decade.
Yep.
I mean, many people are in a similar boat, pretty proven, pretty durable. So I guess the durability of this and the longevity of it will be, it's hard to say right now because it's brand new.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of concerns that I have, about the design, but overall, like it's a pretty solid looking device, but you won't know till you use it, right? And you got to get ample time on the device. I mean, that's how we got as far as we got with this. So, this PVS 14 doesn't look exactly like the first PVS 14. So this unit in particular has had some work done to it. I've had this side of the unit replaced so that it now runs off of a AA. It used to have the old bayonet style battery pack that ran off of 2 AA's, and those were notorious for breaking. I mean, they would fail quite a bit. And so if you think about like even this PVS 14, and we have to admit that analog night vision, the housings, the tubes, the glass, everything has been updated over the years, and we got to give an opportunity to the digital side to catch up with all the updates that this part of the industry has had the advantage to go through. So what I would say, just to touch on that, is that this might not be my first piece of night vision because at its price point, I don't know that I would purchase $2,500 worth of night vision here versus trying to find a secondhand unit in the analog side. But if you really want to be able to record stuff, if you want to be able to travel with this device and not be worried about ITAR, if you like some of the other features, or you want to combine it with something else, like combine it with a thermal or something like that, I think it's a great option, and I encourage people to, participate in the digital night vision market so that we can see advances come out of it. Yeah. If nobody plays with the stuff and gives feedback to the manufacturer or manufacturers, hopefully there'll be some other options out into the market, then it won't ever advance, and it'll kind of die on the vine, unfortunately.
For sure. I do think it's definitely the future. Obviously, I got one, and I do have analog night vision as well. Not like a Flex or anything, but just saying. It was kind of like I went the analog route first, but the digital side of things is just like I said. I think it's a lot of the excitement that I have wrapped up in it, and this is a genuine improvement that we see now. And I mean, recording stuff at night is cool.
It is.
Because if you ever go out and you got buddies that you're just going shooting with and stuff like that, how often are you thinking, oh, this is really awesome, I want to get a video of this, or somebody's going to run a drill and I'd like to film them, and then you're trying to hold the phone up to a PVS 14, and either it's the one that you had on your face, so now you're not seeing anything properly, and you're holding a phone up to the thing that is seeing properly, and it's kind of shaky and crummy imagery, or something along those lines. I mean, now you can have the thing that is on your face be the thing that is also recording, and it does a really good job of it. So I think that's really neat, and hopefully you'll be seeing some videos and stuff like that from us using this thing here at Edge.
And I will say the footage that I've seen come out of the Opsin has been pretty good, footage. Better than your average like security camera stuff. So I will say that. I think the other thing that can take a leap forward for digital night vision is I can only imagine it would be less expensive to have a dual tube setup or something similar to a panoramic setup. Meshing other things in with it, thermal integrated into one of these devices would be an awesome capability. So I think there's a lot of real opportunity for growth on the digital side that isn't strictly with hey, how do I make it so that I can see in a much darker environment, more like an analog device, or play around with some of the other things that are restricted, like field of view, the ability to add a different spectrum, things like that, and they've done a pretty good job with that by integrating some of those other features, navigation aids, the recording capability, those sorts of things. I just think there's more room for opportunity there to make it a more attractive tool, or at least as attractive as some of the analog devices.
For sure.
So
hopefully this was a pretty non-biased view at it. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything, right? So that's kind of a rundown, though. And if you were somebody who didn't even realize that there was a digital option out there, and all you've kind of been aware of is the analog side of things, then there's a little extra info for you out there, and it'll only be, I guess, a matter of time until we can just see what people continue to come out with. Like Mike said, it's really awesome that so many private citizens, individuals are getting into night vision. That capability is one that you don't realize is as awesome as it is until you actually experience it. A lot of people are like, well, what would I need it for? And then all of a sudden you get it and you're like, oh, wait a minute. I can do anything, at night. I can walk around, see anything. Like, the amount of stuff that you actually see is amazing. So it's really cool. And, of course, when you mix it with firearms and lasers and all that other stuff, it only gets better.
Yeah. I think there's that initial wow factor that people get when you hand them a set of night vision, and their only exposure is like in the movies. Yeah. And they get to look at something cool. Like, I usually will, if I have the opportunity, I'll take somebody out when it's a nice starry night. Oh yeah. And let them look through a piece of night vision, and then look up and see how many more stars they can see. The other side of it, and then sometimes I feel like it's, okay, like I saw this amazing thing, and now it's just kind of vanilla to me. But then you get them out actually doing stuff, at I think a pretty exciting level, like shooting, driving, things like that, under night vision, and it's like, oh man, this is functionally a superpower. So
it is
pretty awesome.
It's true. All right. Well, if anybody has any questions out there about either of these types of night vision devices, well, I say either of these, I'm not referring to all three. Why not? Because we have that other Aurora Pro over there. If you have questions about those, let us know in the comments, and we can get to those. And if you have suggestions for future episodes with Mike about night vision-related devices, we're going to keep some of them coming. We're going to be recording more, but certainly we want to be recording stuff that you guys want to hear, so that's always good, too. Otherwise, we're just going to see you guys on the next one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
That's a wrap, everybody. Hope you liked this topic. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and, of course, subscribe right here, because there's going to be plenty more to come. If there's topics you'd like to hear us go over on the Vortex Edge podcast in the future, you can let us know by commenting below or hitting us up on Instagram, which is @VortexEdge. We'd love to hear your suggestions so we can be bringing you the kind of episodes and topics that you want to hear. Otherwise, we'll be seeing you on a future episode. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Bye.